Yeah, so let's get into it. I want to organize this a little bit differently than you might be used to if you've ever taken another Shopify course. Instead of just kind of jumping directly into product research, I want to talk about a few things, right? Who are the best buyers? What are some examples of niches that have been successful in the past? I want to talk about, questions to ask yourself about those potential niches. We're going to talk about, just some things to remember up front, just kind of so you're, set up for success and you can hit the ground running from a product research perspective rather than kind of making these mistakes after you've already, thought you found a product that could potentially be a winner. So let's go through these one by one. And then we can actually jump directly into product research with a ton of different resources, a ton of different, websites and, Trend Hunter and a lot of different things that you're going to be able to use to identify kind of up and coming niches and specific products to actually sell. So who are the best buyers? For the most part, women are the best buyers. We found in our specific experiments with Shopify, right? They're more willing to engage. Normally they control the household spending a little bit more. And normally they are the one who buys the gifts, right? So I personally don't usually buy people gifts. I probably should, but my mom will remind me to buy gifts for my sister, my grandma, and all those people. So it's just kind of how it works, at least in my family. And it's what we've found from a demographic perspective is also kind of reciprocated in our business on Shopify, right? So baby boomers, again, 97 million people are kind of getting older, right? They're used to computers now. They have disposable income because, even though there's millions and millions of, 17-year-old, 16-year-old kids on the internet, not all of them have credit cards and not all of them kind of have the disposable income to be able to buy things from Shopify. So you kind of want to keep these things in mind with every decision you're making as far as what niche to actually get into, because although there are a ton of young kids on Snapchat and on all the other different mediums and things like that on the internet, they aren't necessarily the ones who are going to take their credit card out, give you sales, and in the end give you profit, which is kind of the point of all of this, right? So and baby boomers are normally the gift buyers, cosmetics, anti-aging, home decor, recreation, romance, convenience, right? These are all very good niches to actually think about and to consider getting into, right? And so then specialties. So we're talking about Christmas, hunting, garden supplies, cyclists, hobbyists, enthusiasts, right? We don't want to ever get into a niche that is readily available at Safeway or Walmart, depending on where you live in the USA or whatever your grocery store chain is, right? We are never wanting to get into kind of the day-to-day things that you could just go to Walmart and buy, because nobody is going to buy toilet paper if they see a Facebook ad for it. That's just not how it works. We want to get into niches that are a little bit harder, or actually a lot harder to actually find, right? And it's just, you need to be able to offer that value that isn't available as easily other places, right? So let's talk about a few niches that we personally have proven to be successful. And I just wanted to mention really quickly before we get into this, be forward thinking, right? Most of us probably don't have the millions of dollars of capital and, teams of geniuses to start the next Oculus Rift. And for those of you who don't know, that's virtual reality. The Facebook company just bought Oculus Rift. And so, most of us aren't probably going to make the next virtual reality machine. But, a lot of us could, if we're forward thinking and we're thinking about where the trends are going with technology, a lot of us could potentially, make accessories for it, like replacement bands or, maybe decals to put on it or whatever the case may be, right? You kind of have to get creative, but, you want to always be thinking about where consumers are going and then be able to actually get a portion of that specific niche, through your foresight. Another great one is drones. I have a friend who personally started a Shopify store surrounding drone accessories, right? So they sell replacement propellers, they sell carrying cases, all types of different accessories for drones, and they're doing a great job. So let's talk about a few niches that are successful and that have been proven successful, right? This is not an exhaustive list. The point of this is not to give you, what niche you should go into. It's to talk about why these niches are important. And once you kind of understand why these niches have been successful, what the kind of underlying causes are, then you can go out and find your own niche by kind of replicating the elements that made these successful, right? So what about an aquarium makes this niche successful? So aquariums are a perfect example of a hobbyist, right? People who buy aquariums are normally very passionate about it. There's a ton of different little things that kind of go into aquariums, which is something that you want to be thinking about as well, right? You need the pumps, the rocks, any of the little plants, fake plants, or any of the figurines or anything that are inside of it. There's a number of different small items that go along with aquariums, right? So there's a lot of little accessories and little parts that kind of go with it. People that buy aquariums are normally very passionate about it. People who buy, larger aquariums usually have a lot of disposable income because they're quite expensive, right? So they're probably not very cost conscious, which is something that, is a great kind of asset as well when you're going into a niche. Golf is an amazing one, right? Again, there's a ton of little things. I have it pulled up here. There's a ton of little just golf ball pickup, retriever, grabber, claw, sucker, right? Like there's little pendants. Golf jewelry is a great one that a friend of mine is actually doing an incredible job with. Training aids, all types of things, like this little thing that is just like supposed to keep your wrist straight. There's so many little accessories that are popularized by golf channels, and golf is the perfect example of a target market that has a ton of disposable income and time, right? They've been accustomed to using a computer and using e-commerce in the baby boomer kind of realm. It also kind of plays to the younger crowd, to both men and women. So it's just a really amazing niche that we're probably actually going to use as some of our examples going into things. And so let's just, for the sake of consistency, let's just type in aquarium as well. And so we see a ton of stuff, right? Filters, glow in the dark artificial luminous decorations, right? This is a great one. If you're going to go to Walmart, would you walk into Walmart expecting to be able to find a 50-piece glow-in-the-dark artificial luminous aquarium decoration set? It's like absolutely not, right? You go to Walmart, you're going to buy toilet paper, and that's maybe not glamorous, but that's just the difference. And that is the type of product that you want to keep in the back of your mind as something that you want to drop ship. You want it to be unique, you want it to be a specialty item, and you want it to be difficult to find at a Walmart or grocery store in general, right? So we're gonna go with specialty bow ties. A lot of different types of specialty kind of clothing are really good kind of niches to get into. And what I mean, and think about the reason for this, right? If you want a bow tie, let's say that you're obsessed with like platypuses or something random, or like maybe your girlfriend loves octopuses, and you want to get him or her or whatever the case may be a bow tie with like a specific animal or maybe like a specific city name or some type of additional level of specificity than just a normal regular bow tie. Where would you be able to go? Again, you could not walk into a Walmart or a Sears or any type of clothing store, generic clothing store, and be able to get a specialty bow tie in the way that you could from an e-commerce store, right? And there's ways to go about, looking what types of bow ties that we'd actually populate the store with, right? Because, if I was watching this, I might think, yeah, but how do I know which type of bow ties would sell, right? And there's a ton of different ways to know how, which type of bow ties would sell. And we're going to talk about that in depth. But, just for right now, I just want to talk about niches that are successful and kind of why that is. So specialty sunglasses, again, I have a friend who created a bamboo and wooden sunglass store, and he's doing an absolutely fantastic job, right? This is the perfect type of kind of niche to get into, or it was before, he did it and a number of other people kind of saw his success and replicated it. The perfect type of niche to get into because, a lot of people, almost everyone has a pair of sunglasses, right? So there's it's hugely pervasive market, appeals to both men and women. There's not many kind of wooden sunglasses available, right, at like Sunglass Hut or again, Walmart or some of the big box stores. And, some of the bamboo sunglasses look very stylish and people are willing to pay a premium for it because it's not available readily other places, right? So I've actually purchased, I'm the type of person that does not really purchase much from Facebook. Facebook ads don't work on me very well because I use Facebook ads so much that I'm kind of like, cynical about buying from Facebook ads, which is kind of strange. But I've actually purchased a pair of bamboo sunglasses from a Facebook ad just because it looked so sexy, right? I actually reached out to the store owner and we became friends, right? And so he was doing a great job with his product photography, right? He took them straight from Aliexpress, and we'll teach you how to find all of the HD images from Aliexpress. So you aren't going to have to worry about taking your own product photography. It's all kind of done for you. So matcha is a great example. So matcha is basically a green tea powder. Again, with specialty types of health products. They're a little bit more risky because health products trend very heavily, and then some tend to fade, right? But matcha, there's a ton of people who did a great job with selling matcha green tea powder via e-commerce, and the trend did eventually start to lessen. But if you are on kind of the up and coming and you set up the infrastructure to be kind of ahead of the curve when you're starting to notice these trends, right? If you see it on Oprah, it might be too late. But if you hear about it on the radio or like a popular organic health blog or a number of different resources that you could actually hear about it from, and then you kind of get ahead before the curve really starts to explode, then you can be in a position where you can have that competitive advantage and be able to kind of take advantage of it. So vintage, retro, futuristic, minimalist, clothing, furniture, accessories, right? So that's kind of a mouthful. Oh, and chalk paint. So these two are great ones just because vintage and retro, it's kind of like a seasonal thing. With fashion, a lot of times there's kind of a rotation of popularity, right? So it'll become popular, it'll kind of fade, and then it'll cyclically become popular again. So vintage and retro and futuristic and minimalistic clothing is just a great one. It's maybe not too minimalistic for clothing, but you want to add an additional layer of specificity. Whether it's vintage sunglasses, it just appeals to a target audience that is a very accustomed to purchasing specialty items, which is what drop shipping is about. Enamel pins, fishing, these are two amazing ones. Fishing is absolutely a beautiful topic, right? Again, a ton of different tiny little lures and jackets and replacements for reels and all different types of lures with colors and fish and wiring and fake fish and all of these different things, all these tiny little kind of things that you can send very easily. Again, it has a little bit older of a demographic, usually with more disposable income and time, and they're used to computers, and they have the ability to pay a little bit extra for these things in a specialty sense that they want. Enamel pins are perfect, small, very cheap to ship, incredibly inexpensive to create, and you can kind of create enamel pins for anything, right? Whether it's like a meme or a popular like TV show, if it's like Game of Thrones in some way, right? And we'll talk about later in the course how to kind of go about selling things that you need licensing for, specifically like Harry Potter, Game of Thrones, and things like that. Specialty socks, everyone wears socks, or hopefully most people wear socks, and socks are a great one. They've been proven again and again to be extremely successful from a dropshipping perspective, right? We've seen people create multi-million-dollar businesses with socks that have kind of a layer of rubber on the bottom that are kind of makeshift shoes that you can store in camping, or if you don't have very much space in your backpack, but you kind of want that additional option. We've seen people make Star Wars socks and all different types of kind of like niche socks for very passionate fan bases, which is a huge advantage from a dropshipping perspective. Jewelry is one that has kind of been very beaten into everyone if you kind of do follow the space as being very successful. Jewelry makes an important point, right? Because every time that we want to consider getting into a niche from a dropshipping perspective, jewelry kind of plays out the perfect final little point that you want to accentuate, which is, right, the products you sell, you want them to appear valuable, right? You want them to give off kind of the ambiance of value and being expensive, but you don't want them to actually, in reality, be expensive to buy. And jewelry is the perfect example of that. It looks valuable, right? It looks expensive, but actually in real life, unless you're using like real gold and real diamonds, which none of these suppliers would be using, right? It's actually in reality very cheap. So if it looks expensive, but it doesn't cost very much money, that is the perfect kind of item that you want to drop ship, right? Because it gives you, those higher multiples of, return on investment and profit, right? Because if you're buying it for $1 and you're selling it for, $10, it gives you a lot of space, to pay for shipping and more kind of cost for advertising, and still kind of give you that room that you really want as far as a profit margin, right? It allows you to, give 30% off coupons, 50% off coupons for new buyers, right? And getting a new buyer, if, you follow the space at all, is much harder than kind of selling to an existing buyer. So, steep discounts where you're still profiting to get those first customers is a huge advantage. And we're going to talk about how to kind of lure people in with big discounts. We're going to talk about free plus shipping models. We're going to talk about all that in just a few minutes. But first, I want to kind of get everyone into the mindset of what you want to look for in a niche, right? So minimalist wallets for men, again, all kind of the same thing that I was talking about before. Specialty jewelry, vintage wedding dresses, right? So this is one that I wanted to kind of accentuate just because wedding dresses is not a good niche, right? There's so many people out there. There's so many big companies who are selling wedding dresses, but vintage wedding dresses, right? Or retro wedding dresses, or, maybe pink wedding dresses for like the people who kind of want to be a little bit different. Wedding dresses is far too competitive, but vintage wedding dresses might not be, right? We'd be doing a little bit more research on all of these, but just kind of getting in the mindset right now. So craft supplies is a great one, especially kind of with the growing popularity of DIY or do-it-yourself type stuff on YouTube, where people are making crafts, on Instagram, on Facebook, all of the different videos that you kind of see throughout your life of people making all different types of cool little crafts and things like that. Craft supplies is an amazing niche to consider getting into. Yoga was kind of one of the original ones, right? People who kind of made the yoga pads popularized on Amazon. Similarly with Shopify. Coffee, tea, cosmetics, three billion-dollar companies, billion-dollar kind of niches to get into, have become a little bit more competitive in recent times. But if you can find, your specific niche, maybe it's, vegan tea for, kids, or that's probably not a great example, but, you could do like specialty. Specialty. That's kind of a nice name, that I just thought of. So nobody steal that. But if you can think about an additional kind of narrower, like we've talked about multiple times already, to find your niche within a niche of tea or coffee or cosmetics or whatever it is, right? That is how kind of you really differentiate yourself. So a good example is the Honest Company, right? Jessica Alba and I forget her business partner's name. They kind of turned a environmentally friendly line of products into $1 billion company, right? And it kind of came out later that they weren't always being the most environmentally friendly, but they did a great job of marketing, right? The kind of like socially conscious person who wanted to be better about the environment, not pollute, not like produce so much waste. They were spending a little bit extra money, kind of spending money with the Honest Company because they felt better about not destroying the earth. So they found their niche within a niche of environmentally friendly diapers and all the different things that they were selling. So that's just kind of an example that came right off the top of my head. So this is Trend Hunter. We're going to look more into all of these websites in later videos, but I just wanted to show you guys kind of really quickly. Trend Hunter is a great website that I use all the time, and it basically just shows all types of trending products. Right, so eco bamboo compacts. This is amazing. Like whether it's like a bamboo coaster or refillable lip balm. Some of the stuff I would just never think about. Oh, that's funny. Sustainable cosmetics containers, right? So this is environmentally friendly, like we were just kind of saying. Athletic Australian streetwear. So that is a beautiful niche to get into, right? And with the beauty of drop shipping is, e-packet, which we'll talk about later, the fastest way of shipping goes to a number of different countries, and I would assume Australia is one of them. We'll talk about that in a second. So golden chocolate bars, right? 100 days before the Winter Olympics, playing off, real world events like the Olympics or, the World Cup or whatever. The people who are kind of playing off that and, recognizing the huge marketing presence of these multi-million or billion-dollar kind of events, and then capturing a piece of those events through their Shopify stores are people who are doing a great job, right? Seasonality, selling Halloween clothing or Halloween, whatever it was, right? Halloween just passed recently, but people are making millions and millions of dollars kind of taking advantage of Christmas every year and things like that. So co-branded knee highs, collaborative designer pop-ups, right? Pop-ups in the windows, right? This is amazing. I mean, I could go through this for hours, so we're not going to look too much into that because I'll get distracted. But so let's talk about questions to ask yourself about a potential niche that you're considering. So let's say that you kind of came into, let's just say that you wanted to do enamel pins. You're going to do like a whole Shopify niche store around enamel pins. Maybe you're going to do pigs because you love micro pigs, and that people are out there and they also love micro pigs. So you decided to make an entire line and store of enamel pins surrounding micro pigs. So questions to ask yourself about this niche. Are the products easily available from a supplier? So this is a great one, right? So let's say that we were, trying to figure this out. So we would just type in micro pigs, and see what was available here, right? So there's a ton of different like stuff here, so they're obviously available, pretty cheap. And these prices are not the kind of one size fits all. If you order more pieces or you start to do like a larger volume, these will go down. And we're going to talk about how to negotiate those prices down to get the best possible prices. And again, enamel pins. Aliexpress has the capability of creating basically whatever you want, right? And so we're gonna, talk about how to kind of identify which of these suppliers are the best, right? 2,700 orders of these, and we could find, this is a kit, this is a cat, but I'm sure that they'd have the capability of making, whatever print that you actually kind of gave them, and so. Yes, the products would be easily available from a supplier. Are products in demand in this chosen market, right? We'd be able to use Google Trends and a couple of other different sources to see, the exact search volume that people are looking for from a buyer perspective related to our niche, which we'll talk about later, right? Are people willing to pay for the product in this chosen niche? 2,700 orders, a lot of orders, thousands and thousands of orders on all of these different things. So we do know that people are paying for enamel pins, especially if you're doing kind of your research correctly as to what niche to get into and things like that. Do you have an interest in this product? Yes, I absolutely love micropigs personally, so I do have an interest in this product. It just makes things easier, right? If your interest is in making money and you find a niche that you've proven to work, and even if it's not what you're hugely passionate about, earning passive income so you can do what you're hugely passionate about is one of my passions, right? And so, I always suggest that people have some interest, but if you find a killer niche and it's not the most interesting thing in the world to you, don't ditch it just because of that. Can the products be obtained at a low enough cost and sold at a high enough profit margin, right? And so you want to aim for a 50% profit margin here. So, we'd maybe look at some enamel pin stores. Maybe we'd type in, enamel pin Shopify. There are ways to find Shopify stores for any keywords, which we will talk about later on. And so you'd be able to look at people's Shopify stores, and I guarantee you that I could find this exact pin on a Shopify store right now, and I bet you that it would cost $9.95, and I bet you that they're paying 50 cents per. So that's obviously, a 20 times multiplier, not factoring in shipping and things like that, but that would be a healthy enough margin that you'd be able to do big discounts to get people in the door. You'd be able to have enough advertising budget to be able to get the sales and get the people into your email lists and get them into your drip campaigns to give them future offers for discounts and things like that if they purchase more, or there's all types of things which we're going to talk about in the scaling section of the course. Could you leverage into a brand or create an informational digital product for the niche product, right? And so absolutely you could leverage an enamel pin collection into a brand, right? You could call it like pins for like winning pinning or whatever, it doesn't matter, right? Like I just thought of that in 1 second. Pins that win. You could easily make that into a brand. And could you create digital products for the niche product? This is one that I just personally like to consider. This isn't like a necessity by any means, but if you could create a digital kind of product for it. So let's say you could launch a YouTube channel all about enamel pins, right? How to make them, the best uses for them, how to take care of them, your favorite or the rarest ones you found or whatever, right? So if you can kind of form a following of people who are interested, or maybe a Facebook group about it or whatever, it helps immensely in forming a brand. Is the product a temporary trend, right? So the best way to look at this is just Google Trends, which we'll talk about later on, to see whether or not people are interested in enamel pins all year round, or whether they're only interested in enamel pins like maybe only during Q4 or during December or things like that. And so the last part of this specific video is going to be just things to remember, right? So cars are a niche. You don't want to get into cars, right? Cars are, a very widely spread kind of thing. They're not what we would want to get into for drop shipping. You want to get into what I call a sub niche, right? So maybe instead of just making a Shopify store selling, car parts or whatever, you'd want to get into, selling Mustang interior parts and wheels, like maybe, rims for vintage Mustangs is a much more, specific niche or sub niche that you'd actually be able to kind of carve out your specific, portion of the overall profits, right? Again, stay away from commodities. We talked about this before. You're not going to be on Shopify selling toothpaste or toothbrushes or toilet paper. Maybe you could sell novelty toilet paper with like Donald Trump's face on it. And no offense to anyone who likes Donald Trump, I'm kind of indifferent. But toilet paper, novelty toilet paper actually is kind of a large seller. So I've seen Hillary Clinton on toilet paper, I've seen Justin Bieber, I've seen Donald Trump, and I've seen those selling a number of different reasonably high volume on Amazon. So toilet paper would be a no, but maybe novelty toilet paper would be a yes. Similarly with toothpaste, right? I've seen, Tom's did a great job of carving out kind of the organic toothpaste niche in the toothpaste realm. And so, stay away from just generic commodities, but that doesn't mean that you couldn't do it if you get creative, right? It's all about utilizing your own abilities, your own experiences to kind of get creative and create, carve out your sub niche in these larger niches, right? So higher ticket products usually have higher profits, right? There's less orders to track. There's less help desk and customer service issues, right? So the more expensive that we can have each individual product, it's kind of the better. There is no one size fits all for all of this, right? We ship things that are big and heavy and expensive. We ship things that are small and light and cheap. It kind of depends on, what you can find, what you can make work. The point of all of this is to understand the process and then be able to test a ton of stuff and then just scale the things that work and, stop the things that don't. Right, you want your average order to be $50 to $75, and again, 50% profit margin is normally what I shoot for. $50 to $75 is good, and there's a lot of ways to kind of incentivize people to do this, like free shipping if your cart value is $50, and I'll show you exactly how to set that up in Shopify, from a pragmatic perspective or practical perspective. Average weight, right, lighter is better. We're going to talk about this more later, but e-packet shipping is just the best way to ship as a dropshipper. One of the biggest problems with dropshipping is the delivery times, right? So a lot of people have kind of gotten used to like the 2-day delivery or 3-day delivery with Amazon Prime. With dropshipping, e-packet is a 12 to 20 day shipping time, and that's about the best that you can expect, right? And so this is kind of the trade-off. If you're going to do Amazon FBA, which I also teach, right, there's more upfront costs, but again, Prime shipping is a huge reason that people will, pay an additional cost to get it faster. But with drop shipping, the fastest you can expect to get your products to your customers is 12 to 20 days, and that's with e-packet shipping, which is the fastest version of shipping. And so to qualify for e-packet, your products have to be less than 4.4 pounds and have to be less than $400 in value. And we'll talk about that again, but it's just something to keep in mind, right? And so the more random, the better. So we're talking about, train horns, specialty Christmas ornaments, maybe like they're, rude Santas with like his middle fingers up or something for like the messed up people out there like me who have weird senses of humor. Halloween costumes is a good one. Specialty items like, random flags, obviously not the American flag. That's very easy to buy, but maybe like if people wanted, like a Estonia flag might be a little bit harder. So I've seen, specialty stores and Shopify stores that sell things like that. Weird and embarrassing is good for this, right? Because people don't want to go into Walmart and buy like, sexual toys or things like that, or, nail fungus medicine or things like for baldness, right? People don't want to be embarrassed. They don't want to admit to the cashier that they're buying condoms or whatever it is, right? And so weird and embarrassing can be good. So we already talked about this. You don't want anything that's available at Walmart, really. And to avoid ridiculous shipping times, like we said, you want to choose what's called e-packet shipping, which is 12 to 20 days rather than, what can actually be 40 days via like China Post and things like that. So the product requirements for e-packet shipping, like we said, is 4.4 pounds and can't exceed $400 in value. So those are two things to keep in mind. And e-packet ships to these 30 countries, right? So we're not going to read off all of these, but Australia, like we were talking about with the Australian street clothes, is one of them, right? Obviously, the USA, Canada, some of the larger companies, Lithuania, Luxembourg, Switzerland, right? So the USA. So these are kind of the ones that are available, and it's quite easy. Just Google search, e-packet eligible countries if you forget these, or you want to just make sure that they ship to the country that you're interested in. Because targeting Facebook ads for, Croatia or whatever, or Denmark, the country specifically of people who speak English, or maybe you have an advantage out there, you're watching the course and you speak German, right? Maybe you want to only target the German market and ship straight from China, and that's kind of, the competitive advantage that you have from a marketing perspective, right? So it really all kind of starts to play together once you guys, we get farther into this. And we're going to talk about all of this in the Facebook ad portion of this, right? But really, I think a lot of you probably are starting to get the beauty of how, some of these markets are very less competitive, or so much less competitive. The ad costs are much lower, right? And it does not make a difference. You can ship these enamel pins to Germany for the exact same price as you can ship them to the USA, right? So this is not all to the USA. You can ship to any of these countries very quickly, kind of all in the same way. And so it's really, the beauty starts to kind of work together when everything's iterating. You're only advertising to Estonia because maybe you speak the language, or maybe you're only targeting people in Estonia that speak English, and they also like, the popular enamel pin companies. And so really, I think a lot of you are probably kind of starting to get excited. I'm obviously excited. I can't really hide it. This type of thing really gets me, it gets me pumped up, because it's so much fun kind of figuring all of this out. And we're going to go through all of this, and we're going to teach you everything. But that is, kind of the summary, the quick summary, maybe not that quick, but that's the quickest summary to remember all of these things, right? And I would always recommend people to kind of go through the entire first module, right? Take notes for yourself. It helps taking your own notes. Once you've kind of taken notes, maybe come back to any of the videos again and watch them again if you need a reminder, right? But what I suggest is going through the whole first module, taking notes, and then kind of just going onto Aliexpress, going onto all of the other different kind of websites and resources that we're going to go through, and then just do it yourself, right? If you need to rewatch things, do it, because it's yours forever, right? And so I hope you guys enjoyed that. That's kind of the very first part about identifying niches, right? Who we want our target buyers to be, things to remember, right? Are you going to be able to find suppliers for these products, and what type of niches you want to get into and why? So we'll see you on the next one.